You have been there. You are walking through a park or sitting on your own couch, and you make a mistake. You reach out and pet another dog. Or maybe you just give too much attention to a cat, or a new baby, or even a stuffed animal. Within seconds, your dog reacts. They push their head under your hand. They step physically between you and the invisible ghost of the other creature. They let out a low, pathetic whine, or they bark, or they simply stare at you with a look of absolute betrayal. We call it jealousy. We do it instantly, without thinking. We laugh about it. We record it on our phones and say our dog is acting jealous. But for a very long time, animal behaviorists and psychologists hated that word. They hated it because jealousy is not simple. It is not like fear, which is just a biological reaction to an immediate threat. It is not like hunger, which is just an alarm bell for calories. Jealousy is arguably the most complicated emotion a mind can produce. To feel true jealousy, you need a highly sophisticated cognitive map. You need to understand that you exist as an individual. You need to understand that a second individual exists. And, crucially, you need to recognize a third party and understand that the relationship between the first two is somehow threatened by the third. Psychologists call this a triadic relationship. For decades, the scientific consensus was that dogs simply did not have the neurological hardware for triadic thinking. The consensus said that dogs do not feel jealousy. They feel resource guarding. They view you not as a complex emotional partner, but as a dispenser of food, shelter, and security. When another animal approaches you, the dog is not feeling a complex emotion about broken loyalty. They are just protecting their dispenser. They are guarding a piece of property. It is a cold, mechanical way to look at a dog. And for a long time, it was the only scientifically acceptable answer. But what if the science was hiding behind its own rigidity? What if we were using clinical terminology to write off one of the most profound emotional connections in the animal kingdom? If you want to know what is actually happening in your dog's head when they wedge themselves between you and another animal, you have to look at the fake dog experiment. In 2014, researchers at the University of California, San Diego, decided to finally test the jealousy hypothesis. They brought 36 dogs and their owners into a room. The researchers asked the owners to ignore their actual dogs and interact with 3 different objects. The first object was a plastic jack-o'-lantern bucket. The second was a pop-up children's book that played musical melodies. And the third was a realistic, animated stuffed dog that barked, whined, and wagged its tail. The owners were instructed to treat the stuffed animal exactly like a real dog, to pet it, to speak to it sweetly, to give it the exact kind of affection they normally reserved for their own pet. If the resource guarding theory was entirely correct, the dogs should have reacted relatively equally to anything that took their owner's attention away. Attention is the resource. If the owner is looking at a bucket, or a book, or a fake dog, they are not looking at the real dog. The deprivation of the resource is exactly the same, but the dogs did not react the same. When the owners read the pop-up book aloud, only about 20% of the dogs snapped or tried to get between the owner and the book. When they played with the plastic bucket, almost none of the dogs cared. But when the owners petted the fake dog, the room descended into chaos. Nearly 80% of the dogs pushed or touched their owners. A third of them tried to physically wedge themselves between their owner and the stuffed animal. A quarter of them snapped violently at the fake dog. They smelled its rear end. They treated it not as an object taking up time, but as a living rival. The researchers noted something deeply important about the behavior. The dogs were not just trying to get the owner's attention. They were specifically trying to break the connection between the owner and the rival. They were not guarding a resource. They were guarding a relationship. The skeptics look at this and say, they were fooled by a toy. That just proves they are relying on basic instincts. It does not prove they are experiencing the complex human emotion of jealousy. And that is a fair point. Behavior is just behavior. Watching a dog push a toy out of the way does not tell us what it actually feels like to be the dog in that moment. It does not prove the inner, burning ache of jealousy. To find that, you have to look past the behavior. You have to look directly into the brain. Enter Gregory Burns, a neuroscientist at Emory University. Burns did something that most researchers thought was impossible. He trained awake, unrestrained dogs to voluntarily walk into an fMRI scanner and hold perfectly still while he mapped their neural activity in real time. For the first time in history, we were not just watching what dogs do. We were watching how their minds light up when they do it. In one specific experiment, Burns wanted to see what happened when a dog watched its owner give food to a fake dog. When the owners fed the fake dog, a very specific part of the real dog's brain flared with intense activity. It was the amygdala, the region associated with arousal, anxiety, and aggression. But it was not just the amygdala. The scanners also showed a massive spike in the caudate nucleus. In humans, the caudate nucleus is deeply tied to the expectation of reward, but also to social bonds, love, and romantic attachment. It is the part of your brain that lights up when you look at a photograph of someone you are deeply in love with. When the dogs watched their owners give affection to a rival, their brains did not just register a missing treat. Their brains registered a social violation. They processed the event not in the areas associated with simple hunger or territorial defense, but in the exact neural pathways that process complex social attachments. Their brains were reacting to a disruption in love. This forces us into a very uncomfortable corner. If a dog can feel a disruption in love, it means they have to be capable of feeling love in the first place. Not dependency, not learned behavior, not a survival mechanism dressed up as affection. Real, neurological love. And this is where the evolutionary biology gets fascinating and a little bit haunting. Why would evolution do this? Why would evolution program an animal with an emotion as volatile, painful, and dangerous as jealousy? From a purely biological standpoint, jealousy is expensive. It causes stress. It provokes fights. It burns energy. If a dog is just a scavenger looking for a meal, jealousy is a terrible evolutionary strategy. But dogs are not just scavengers. They are the only species on Earth that evolved specifically by merging their entire existence with ours. They did not just learn to live near us. They learned to read our faces. They learned to track our eyes. They learned to interpret the tone of our voices. Over tens of thousands of years, the survival of the dog became entirely dependent on the strength of its bond with a human. A dog with a weak bond to its human was a dog that got left behind in the winter. A dog with a strong bond was a dog that got a place by the fire. In that environment, the relationship itself becomes the most critical asset in the world. More important than food. More important than shelter. The bond is the shelter. So, evolution built an alarm system. Jealousy is the alarm system for a threatened bond. It is the deeply painful, urgent feeling that the most important connection in your life is slipping away, and you have to do something right now to pull it back. We experience it as humans when we see our partner talking a little too closely to someone else. We feel that sudden, sharp spike in our chest, that rush of adrenaline, that overwhelming urge to intervene. When your dog steps between you and another animal, they're feeling that exact same spike. They're hearing the exact same alarm. The infrastructure of the emotion is identical. The fear of loss is identical. The difference is that humans can rationalize it. We can talk ourselves down. We can remind ourselves that we are being insecure, that a conversation is just a conversation, that the bond is safe. A dog cannot do that. A dog lives purely in the vivid, blinding reality of the moment. When they see you giving your affection to something else, they do not have the cognitive ability to rationalize that it is just temporary. They only know that the warmth of your attention, the literal center of their universe, is suddenly shining on someone else. Imagine feeling the intense, burning pain of human jealousy, but not having the vocabulary to explain it, the logic to dismiss it, or the foresight to know it will pass. You only have the panic. And the only tool you have to fix it is to press your body physically against the person you love, hoping that the pressure of your weight will be enough to remind them that you are there. That is what your dog is doing. They're not guarding a resource. They're desperately trying to hold on to the only thing in the world that makes them feel safe. For thousands of years, we have told ourselves that we are the only creatures burdened by the complexities of the heart. We look at animals as simple machines, running on biological scripts, incapable of the poetic, messy, painful emotions that make us human. But the more we look into their eyes, the more we map their brains, the more we study their behavior, the more that wall crumbles. We are not alone in our complicated feelings. The universe is not empty of emotional depth. When your dog looks at you with that pathetic, betrayed expression because you pet a cat, they're not running a mechanical algorithm. They're experiencing the dark side of devotion. They're showing you the exact shape of their love, measured by the terror of losing it. Not a biological reflex you can dismiss. Not a trick of the light you can ignore. Just a choice made over 10,000 years of evolution to tie their entire emotional existence to yours.